Welcome to Baseball and Coffee with Tino and Aaron. We are back. What is up, Aaron?
It's the usual.
Excited to be back. We're coming back to you with our positional series as we've done the previous 2 years. We will be starting with catcher today. Go through our top 16 catchers, have a discussion about why we rank the catchers where we do. If you didn't catch it, we did do a fantasy roundtable with Matt and Doug uh, last week or the week before. That was super fun, but we're going to start pushing more content out here weekly. How you been, Aaron? What's going on?
I'm good. The new year's been good so far. I had just a little bit of time off. My kids are college. Well, I have one senior in high school and then the other two are in college.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had like 5 or 6 days with them. I was able to get most of my evenings off. I still had to work in the mornings, but regardless, like it was less work than normal. And even after kind of going back to work, it's just felt more manageable. And I don't know whether that's just me acclimating to my kind of new 2023 reality and then having it feel better or what's going on. But it's just a little bit more time to myself and more time for baseball, which has been, fantastic. Obviously, this time of year is the time
Yeah.
that you want to be head down and spreadsheets, head down and, fan graphs and those kinds of things. So
Mm-hmm.
it's been good.
Awesome.
MLB off season has been slow, but we've just been those of us who thirst for content and news, like it's just been a waiting game, right?
Right.
But I think it's been a fun off season, but
Mm-hmm.
not the most newsworthy for sure.
I think part of the fun for me is just we have the minute the World Series is over, or the regular season for that matter, the regular season is over. We have this huge, it's like opening a box, like a present on Christmas or something like that, right? You get to unwrap all the stats, and it keeps me entertained up until we get started. I don't like the little gaps and for my in my team column for players who haven't signed yet, but outside of that, super happy. Yeah, I'm here in Walla Walla, and we've been locked in with snow for probably week and a half now, week and a half now, and then it got below, I don't know, 10 below, something like that. So it's been a little gnarly, but to your point, I think at this point in the year, it's even my walk to work. I'm thinking about, I'm listening to a podcast about baseball, or I'm thinking about the next spreadsheet, and I don't know. For people like us, that's an exciting time. There's not much better than that. Um,
Yeah, yeah. When I lay down to go to sleep, sometimes I'll just like pick an exercise of like thinking about a position on my roster that I want to improve, and I'll just go
mhm.
through like in my mind the depth like that position for every single team and think who's at the top of the depth chart, is he going to be kept, just kind of like go through. And usually I only make it through like one or two divisions before I fall
They
asleep.
fall asleep.
But it's a great like mind exercise just to like fall asleep quickly and just kind of like challenge yourself to know the player pool.
Right. I love it. I love it. And I can relate 100%. Um, so we have not talked coffee in quite a while. Why don't you, I know you're roasting coffee now for Passenger in Pennsylvania, which is super awesome. Why don't you give us your coffee story for the week?
Yeah, so this story goes, it's about a month old in terms of when it happened, but I thought it was a fun story. We did the director of coffee organized an end of year menu tasting. So we tasted every single coffee on our menu.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 13 foundational coffees. So like those are ones that are available all the time. So that's 13 of the 56 of, if you're good at math, that's 43 coffees that are reserve coffees or reserve menu coffees. And like our menu changes all the time. We're getting new coffees in, where coffees are being retired from the menu. So, and even our blends that are a part of our foundational blends are, have to evolve due to like either just quality or what we have on hand green coffee inventory wise to maintain the blend's integrity. So, even though it's an end of year cupping, it was kind of just like that moment in time. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just a really unique experience to go through and taste 56 coffees. I've never tasted that many coffees at once.
Right.
But just last year was kind of a new chapter for me in coffee, going to Passenger, going to a small roaster, a small artisan roaster like that. And so it just was a great way to end the year and a very unique experience and just felt immense pride for being able to be involved in the coffees that were on the table. And, as I've gone through the year and become more uh, proficient at like understanding both the roasting philosophy and then also like our menus and approaches for each of one of those blends, so it's not often you get a chance to kind of step back and see like in a snapshot, like this is kind of the work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an opportunity to do just that. And then from a coffee appreciation standpoint, to taste all of the coffees, the diversity from coffees all around the world, all the way from India to your traditional Costa Rica, Ecuador, Brazil's to your Africans, to Burundis and Kenya. So, really spanning the globe in one tasting.
Mm-hmm.
It was so much fun, and just again a moment of reflection and
That's
appreciation on my part.
that's super cool. So super cool. Super lucky to have that opportunity to be able to taste so many coffees. That's
Yes.
very, very, very cool. Um, so I subscribe to Atlas Coffee, which is basically a monthly subscription. They send they send you coffee from a region or an origin that you don't know what's coming before it comes, right? And I assume it's whatever they have a lot of. It's whatever they're proud of. Some probably whatever they have a lot of, if I'm being honest. Um, but the quick story that I have that I thought was really funny is I swore off of Rwandan coffee probably in like 2000 and I don't know 12 maybe 11 or 12 because and I didn't know that the history of Rwandan coffee was so recent, like the beginning of the history of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
exporting Rwandan coffee was so recent. And
Sure.
so my immediate association with Rwandan coffee is potato bugs because my experience was so early on in their kind of coffee progression that they hadn't really eradicated the potato bug issue, right? And so it was like spinning a roulette wheel, basically trying to figure out whether that bag of coffee was going to be okay or not. And so I would buy coffee from my shop and it'd be spoiled often because of potato bugs, right? So potato bugs basically make the whole bag of coffee spoiled, right? And it's a really, really rough flavor. There's no saving it. So when I got my last shipment of Atlas from Atlas, I'm always excited. The bags are super pretty, right? Super fun. They give you
Mm.
you've got a couple of postcards. It's an explanation of the farm, explanation of the flavor profile, roast profile. So I get this and I'm like, man, for real, like $27 worth of Rwandan coffee. And I read it and I'm like kind of like, okay, I'm still gonna try to drink it or try it, right? And it's beautiful. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm not, as I get older, I appreciate African coffee, I think a little less than I used to. And I appreciate a lot of the Central Americans a little bit more. I think my palate has changed a bit. But, anyways, the funny part was just that, or the interesting part to me is how investment in what I assume investment in infrastructure and trying to help the farms and Rwanda as a whole kind of uh, get up to speed and eradicate this potato bug issue really it shines through the coffee, right? Because I hadn't had Rwandan coffee in so long, and now I have this, and it was beautiful, and I'm really appreciative of it, and it just shows again what kind of investment in infrastructure and farms and people can do for something
Hmm.
like that. I would have never appreciated Rwandan coffee in this way previously, and so it was just a cool lesson, a cool learning. Obviously, I came into it with some knowledge and some experience, but really beautiful coffee, and I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. It's actually what I'm drinking right here.
So did they give you several like farms from Rwanda, or is it just one large bag of a specific lot? Or
Usually it's one bag from a specific lot, and I
okay.
don't I don't know where it was from. I could go grab it. I don't know exactly where it was from, but yeah, it's just it's cool. It's a cool process. It's a cool program. Living in the middle of nowhere in Walla Walla, I've got one coffee shop that roasts pretty well, and one coffee shop that sources from Spokane and Seattle and Portland. But it is given the terrain and some of the weather and stuff to have really beautiful coffee show up at your house once a month is a pretty first world and pretty cool if you ask me.
Yeah, for sure. 100% Africa today because I'm having a dry process brew this morning.
Nice. Awesome. So we are going to get into catcher. Um, Catcher is, I think we could do a whole episode on catcher strategy, because, there is a lot of debate, at least amongst us, if we call our own league and friends a fantasy baseball community. There's a lot of debate as to the value of the catcher position. And we play in a, for those who don't remember, excuse me, in a hybrid keeper league. There's 16 teams, 30 players per team. 5 of them have to be minors eligible, and you get to keep 15 players year over year. So, and there's trading of draft picks. So basically you keep 15, you draft 15. And so there's a lot of strategy wrapped up in whether to keep a catcher or not. And
Right.
because of at bats, because of, kind of injuries and volatility of the position offensively. Why don't you get us started with your number one catcher, and we'll just kind of start from there. We can go back and forth.
Sure thing. Yeah, so for me, my number one catcher is surprising no one is as Adley. I think you could debate William Contreras with him, but I have Adley and William Contreras in my first tier together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the way I view them. They were clearly, they're two max volume players who also have elite skills at the plate. So they both appear quite a bit of DH, as well as catch. Their catching is a positive. Their defensively is a positive attribute for their teams, but they're so valuable that they also DH'd quite a bit, and I don't see that ending. So there was only one other catcher eligible player that I had using steamer projections that were projected up for over 600 plate appearances. So combined that level of plate appearances with their track records and their skills, they to me were in a tier by themselves.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I have those same two, 1 and 2. I think with Adley's profile, so Adley was 277, 362, 807 OPS last season, 687 plate appearances, to your point, 84 runs, 20 homers, 80 RBIs. Walk and K rate basically the same. And he DH'd 46 games, which is something that we've talked quite a bit about being important at catcher if your bat is good enough to actually DH when you're not catching. Some of the weirdness in his profile that gives me a little bit of pause, at least modern day baseball, is that he doesn't hit as many fly balls as I think you might want. And from a power standpoint, he was below 35%, and he doesn't pull the ball a ton. So he sprays the ball a lot, which on the one hand is good for average. On the other hand, is not necessarily good for power, especially as a switch hitting catcher in Baltimore. So if he's going to left field as a left-handed hitter, that's a really tough place to hit a home run. And then his zone contact rate is 92.4% last season, which is so high for me. We've debated this, but is so high for me that I think that there are times where he makes suboptimal contact because he has such good hand-eye coordination, and I think that does hurt his power a little bit. That said, he's 25. He's a pretty safe bet to go, I'd say, 180 runs and RBIs combined this season. And I say he's the only catcher capable of 290, 390, 500 triple slash, which would be amazing at catcher. Contreras is scary to me, so I have him at 2 as well. But he's a high BABIP, high ground ball. He's 53% ground ball rate in 22, and then 55% ground ball rate in 23, which boosts his average, as we know.
And also doesn't pull or put the ball in the air, to your
Right.
point about Adley, but even less so.
Right. And that's if you're comfortable with it, so he's done it 2 years running, right? And if you're comfortable with that profile, I say go for it. But there's something about his profile that's a little funky for me, or I could maybe really fall 1 year. He might crater 1 year and then come back because ground balls are so, there's so much luck involved with whether you hit a ground ball for a base hit or an out. Are you comfortable with Contreras like solidly at 2, or is it, do you have the same concerns with Contreras?
Yeah, I think the nits to pick, you outlined him very well. I mean, his quality of contact overall, while he hits the snot out of the ball, um, he also has quite a few hits that are less than optimal. You outlined his ground ball and his launch angle, but he still walks 10% of the time. He only strikes out 20% of the time. My other concern is just I think Milwaukee is a little bit, in a nascent period of their team. They're going to kind of be on a down slope here for a year or two. I think,
Right.
just based on looking at the roster and depth chart and the managerial change and the teams, uh, kind of pulling back the spending. So, you look at a guy who yes is going to have a premium lineup spot, but compared to Adley, who's on a top 3 scoring team in the American League, I think his opportunities to score runs, drive in runs are going to be diminished. But I think he is 26. I think he's more appealing to me in Dynasty than necessarily redraft. Like if I had him in Dynasty, to me, he's an easy keep
Right.
because of the skills that we just outlined. If it was redraft, that's where I'm more of a pause because there is, I think, some volatility too. Hey, he puts the ground a lot, so if he has a low BABIP year, the team isn't quite as doing as well. He may not perform as well as he did last year and return the
Right.
value that you're expecting, and you're going to have to pay a pretty high price to get him because of what he did.
Right. I think too, part of the ranking for me with these two at 1 and 2 is that you have two catchers who are slotted to hit second in the lineup, and lineup position for catchers is really, really important, right? Because so many catchers tend to hit 6, 7. Like they might have good plate skills, but they're still hitting low in the order, right? So less opportunity to certainly to score runs, usually slightly less opportunity to drive in runs. But the fact that they both hit 2 is really great. And I have no other catchers on my list who are currently slotted to hit 2 according to a roster resource. So to me, there's tremendous value in that. Uh, if you're done with those 2, who do you have at 3?
My next tier is also a tier of 2. My next catcher is Kyle Raleigh, and I called this tier lift and launch.
Nice. It's appropriate. Let's get into Raleigh. So yeah, I'll let you go ahead with that.
Yeah, so just for comparison, I guess the player I was looking at him primarily against was Will Smith of the Dodgers. Um, I think Will has a little bit more of a balanced, profile. Is going to strike out less, maybe walk a little bit more. However, Kyle walked at a 9.5% rate last year. His swing decisions, while he swung out of their zone just a touch above league average, his in zone aggressiveness was, optimal. So I didn't see anything from a plate skill standpoint that would scare me off, given the power he's demonstrated. So while Will Smith, swinging strike rate is half what Cal's is, he does not have the demonstrated power that Cal has shown at the position. I have them both. I have Cal at 551 plate appearances and Will at 524. I like Will's team context a little bit better for runs and RBI, but I think the extra playing time for Cal, as well as the home run category juice that he's demonstrated 2 years in a row, gave him the nod for me. But I think these are 2 really good uh, power players at the position who have a really good skill base that you can count on
Mhm.
in terms of what you're going to get and what their detractions are. So that's for me why I had Cal over Will.
So do you have Will Smith at 4?
I do, yeah,
Okay,
yeah, tier of 2 here.
got it. So I have Raleigh at 4. I agree with all of what you said. I think the fascinating part with him, I look at again modern day baseball. You got a 48.6% fly ball rate and
Mhm.
a 51.1% pull rate. So it's pretty damn clear what he's trying to accomplish.
Yep.
Um, and you saw it with 30 home runs, right? And I think the other thing is that as the season wore on, you saw him move into kind of that 3-4 hole in the lineup. And I think that will continue with Mitch Garver this season, which, I think we'll get to Garver in a minute, but the addition of Garver to that lineup is really going to change some things because I think he's going to have a big presence in the lineup. So with Raleigh and Garver hitting behind Crawford and Julio, I think the offense is going to be better. The other thing with Raleigh is I think he's pretty predictable at this point, right? You're looking at low, when I say low 200s, so like probably 240 to 210 or 210 to 240 average, probably around a 10% walk rate and 25 to 30 home runs. And so what happens around him offensively is going to dictate his runs and RBIs. But I like that predictability, right? If you can have him and pencil him in for, a near 800 OPS and, 80, say 70, 80 runs, 70, 80 RBIs and 25 to 30 home runs, that's a really good player, right? I have him I have Will Smith 7. The reason why I'm lower on Will Smith, I think, than consensus is a he any DH opportunities have gone away for him. So he DH'd 14 times of his 126 games last season, and he DH'd 25 times in 2022. And he's played in 130, 137, and 126 games the last 3 years. So I don't know that I question whether his health is going to be great. And two, if say he has barking knees or a barking back because he's played so much, he's not going to have the opportunity to DH anymore when he's not feeling great because Shohei is there, right? And so I think there's those things. Plus, Dalton Rushing and Diego Cartaya are two of the top 10 catching prospects in the game, and Rushing especially is close, right? And so and then you have Freddie Freeman at first, and Rushing could potentially play a little bit at first, but Freeman's not going anywhere, as we know. So I just think there's a playing time crunch with Smith, and I don't think it's a skills thing. I think his skills are very good, right? I think he's going to give you 20 home runs and 80 RBIs and above 800 OPS. Probably those numbers the rate stats could get even better if he played a little less and he's hitting fourth behind Shohei and Freeman and Betts. But I think that the playing time is going to shrink. I don't think there's any way around, unless they just say, Will Smith, you're catching 140 games or 130 games. At which point in a dynasty, right, you're kind of just going to blow him out and he's going to get hurt at some point. So I have some questions about it. I also, 19 homers and 554 plate appearances last season is a little bit low, especially as a right-handed hitter in LA, because right-handed hitters, left field is a place where balls really fly out in LA. So I think there's a little bit of regression for him coming. I think there's a health question with him because of the amount of games that he's played. And I think the presence of Shohei and Freddie Freeman plus the prospects make me a little lower on him than others are. I might be out in front of that a little too much, but I'm not as high on Will Smith as some others are. And it's not a skills thing. It's a health thing and a roster thing. I have Mitch Garver at 3. No, it's not because he's on my roster in our home league. I'm keeping him on my roster in our home league because I believe he is the 3rd rated catcher. I'm just going to put that out. So Mitch Garver was signed by the Mariners, 2 years, $24 million contract this offseason. Yes, he's never had more than 359 plate appearances. Yes, he's 33 years old. I don't know if he even maintains his catcher eligibility in 2025. I don't think the Mariners are going to catch him very often because they want his bat in the lineup. He had an 870 OPS last season, 19 home runs and 344 plate appearances, and a 138 WRC plus. I love everything about his skill set. I think once he's become a DH, you just see high 40s fly ball rate, high 40s pull rate, 12.6% barrel, almost a 13% walk rate. And he's going to be hitting behind JP Crawford, whose OBP was 380 last year, and Julio Rodriguez. So with Cal Raleigh behind him. So I'm excited about Garver. I think he will far eclipse his season high for career high for plate appearances because he's going to be their DH. I'm excited about Garver, and I think he's a better overall hitter than Cal Raleigh is. Where do you have Garver on your list if you do?
I do. I have him at 9.
What's the concern?
Real quick on Will Smith, I just want a quick reply to what you said. I think if for those who listen to the roundtable, he was my overrated player at the position. Because I'm not sure that many are thinking about it the way that we are in terms of his role, potential decreased opportunity. I think, however, that if the team context was so good and his demonstrated skill and balance wasn't so good, I think he could easily go 80, even 110 games. But yeah, I would take the under on 20 home runs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think the counting stat stability keeps him in that tier for me, but I don't disagree with anything you said about his evolving role or his age going into his age 29 season. I think Garver, I'll tell you a funny story. I was doing our research for the pod and I
Mm-hmm.
saw his swinging strike rate and I thought it was a misprint.
Yeah.
Because it's a spreadsheet
Yeah.
where it pulls up the data from another data set. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, that can't be right. So
Mm-hmm.
like I went to two other sites to verify. I was like, no, it really was 8%,
Yeah.
because I know of his reputation for plate skills as well as power. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, that just says, how can someone who hits the ball that hard have an 8% swinging strike rate?
Yep.
And then I looked at his, it's not uncommon for him. It wasn't like an outlier. He was under 10% the last 2 years as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't a particularly new skill. I would say at this point, you have to say he owns that skill.
Right.
So yeah, the 90th percentile in walk rate, the 98th percentile in chase rate, so the OBP is going to be there. And then you bring the power skills and the ability to impact the ball. He's at nine simply for me because Steamer has him for 525 plate appearances. I think they're seeing the contract that um, the Mariners gave them. They're seeing where he's projected to bat. I'm with all that. I'm with the skills, but as you highlighted, his career high plate appearances is 344. So we're asking the guy to do 525. That's just significant, and he's 33. So
Mm-hmm.
not to say he can't do it, but for me, he's not at nine because of the skills. It's just, can he shoulder 180 more plate appearances,
Right.
even if he's not behind the plate?
Right.
Um,
Because they
that's
are.
my only question. I think the skills and role are evolving, and you've outlined that well. I
Mm-hmm.
think you're right to be excited. Um, and because even at the park, he hits the ball in a way where the park is not really going to be a factor for him, right? So, really intriguing option for this year. And I think the Mariners are very intentional about when they spend. And so I think they saw a specific role and a specific skill set with him that they wanted.
Right.
They've wanted to decrease the amount of swing and miss. They're on the record saying that. So, yeah, it's a really, really a fascinating play.
Mm-hmm. His It's interesting how he's gone from, from a decently rated prospect catcher with the Twins who caught every day to, when Texas signed him, Texas basically made him a part-time DH to this point now where the Mariners signed him. And I know the Mariners are going to carry another third catcher, right? So it's either going to be Sebi Zavala or Blake Hunt, who they got from Tampa. And it's probably going to be Zavala, and they're going to probably play against some left-handed pitching to give Cal Raleigh a rest because that's his weak side. But like I said, I'd be surprised if Garver catches more than like 10 games this season, right? And because the bat can potentially be so good. To me, this is a dream scenario for that kind. Like when we talk about a catcher who doesn't catch but is eligible, this is kind of the dream scenario. The other number that jumped out at me is the 21% chase, right? Which is the lowest of any of the catchers on my top 16, and then the lowest of any of the catchers outside of my 16 as well. I think you couple the ability to not chase with the 8% swinging strike. There's something in that profile that there's more upside to it, right? I haven't brought it up, but there's one year that he had, I think he was in 18 or 19, that was just ridiculous. As you can tell, I'm excited. I'm excited to have him on the team. So if Will Smith was your 4, who do you have at 5?
All right, so this next year's, I think we're going to have some real debate. So my next tier is tier 3 for me. At 5, I have Moreno. At 6, I have Wilson Contreras, and at 7, I have Realmuto.
Okay.
So I got a young guy and two vets here in this
Right.
tier.
So you said Moreno, Wilson, and JT.
Yep.
Cool. So I have Moreno all the way down at 16. I have Wilson at 10 and Real Muto at 9. Let's start with Moreno since he's your number 5. fascinating player. I'll let you get started with him.
Yeah, so as we talked about on the roundtable pod, the detriment with Moreno is that, his launch angle and ground ball rate is suboptimal for, for power, and things like that. So, but I looked at his rolling launch angle, and by the end of the season, his average launch angle was between 7 and 11 degrees, which is still below optimal for power, but it's closer to league average.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the other thing is roster resource has him hitting third,
Mm-hmm.
and his defense. I think he is going to move up this year into to that Cal Raleigh type where he's not going to maybe get to Adley levels
Right.
or William, but where he gets a full complement of catcher plate appearances, maybe 8 to 10 more at DH.
Right.
Right now they have Gurriel in it as their primary DH, but Gurriel can play some outfield. So are there days where, again, if he's their number 3 hitter and he hit in the middle of the lineup in the middle third in the playoffs as well. So, and he was 23 years old. So I think that says to me that's where they see him. So they may get him 10 to 12 games at DH as well. So, and his defense is going to carry that. He can do that and not hurt them behind the plate. So if he takes that batting average potential up to 550 plate appearances, hitting third in the lineup, can he go 75-75 hitting third for the Diamondbacks if he's hitting 270, 280, being conservative based on his hit skills and lack of swing and miss. And he continues to improve as his launching. Again, if that's all he has to do, I see enough things that are trending up, and I see the playing time. Like we talked about, like plate appearances matter, and I just think hitting third and being a full-time catcher and the lack of swing and miss, like I think there's some real potential there. So it's a bit of a flag in the ground for me to put him at 5.
Mm-hmm.
But I just see a lot more to get excited about than the guys behind him,
Mm-hmm.
the veterans that is. But
I I like Moreno a lot. I've tried to trade for him in multiple leagues. One of the things that's concerning to me and why I have him at 16 is he we've been saying the same thing about Moreno for 4 years now, right? Since he was a low minors prospect for the Blue Jays, where he was a highly rated prospect, but it was always, can he elevate, right? Can he elevate? Can he elevate? And it's still the same question. And I think, what I have in my write-up is he can be a 300 hitter with 10 homers, or he can be a 260 hitter with 17. Um, what I don't see with him, and I do see the counting stat upside if he does stay at 3, but I think if he doesn't start to elevate, I don't know that he remains hitting 3, right?
sure.
And so I think I can see an outcome that supports where you have him on this list. He's not the one that I choose to plant the flag with, I guess is the best way to put it. I will wait and see. But if he is 5th next season, like going into 25, would not surprise me at all. Again, it's been the same conversation about Moreno since he was on the scene. And I think the Diamondbacks are gambling in the same way that you are. And I admire that. I wish there were more hitters like Moreno now, because there used to be, right? There used to be tons of line drive hitters, guys trying to hit 300, super fun, and they don't exist, right? And even if they do exist, like him, the question is, how come they can't elevate? He's a really fun player to watch. I do think so. This is a more philosophical conversation, but I do think that sometimes with catcher defense, it can be a detriment fantasy wise, because the Diamondbacks may say, do we want, because he's a Gold Glove catcher, right? He won the Gold Glove in the NL last season at 23 years old. They may say, do we want Moreno and his defense and his bat in the lineup for 125 games? But if his defense was worse, it might be, let's catch Moreno for 100 and then DH him for 40, right? I think his plate appearances may in fact come down slightly because his defense is so good, right? Does that make sense? You may not
It
agree,
does. Yeah.
but
No,
it's a
I mean,
thought that
no,
I
it
have.
makes perfect sense, right? We're all trying to look into the future and it's hazy, right?
Right.
Yeah. I
But
don't
I
know.
think
I just see the triple slash of 284, 339, 408 as a
Mhm.
rookie, and yeah, he might be a 10 home run, but and there might be 30 doubles,
Right,
5 steals and 10 home runs and 80 runs in RBI.
totally.
I just think that he doesn't have to blow the moon off to be really, really good. But
Not at all. Well, there could be 40 doubles, 8 triples, right? He's a decent speed, right? It could be
mhm.
40 doubles, 8 triples, 12 homers, and still have a 810 OPS because he's hitting the ball in the right spots. I love him. He did make my 16 over some other players that I think are on most people's 16. I'm gonna wait a year to see. Uh, so you have Contreras at 6, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah. Or Wilson, I mean. Um,
yeah. Older, yep, older Contreras, Cardinals.
uh he's so 2 year was it last year or 2 years ago? I traded for him and kept him, and I was super excited. And I think it was the peak for me of being kind of valuing EVs and barrel rates, and because he's like his brother, he's a good, when you look at just those numbers, you see some really incredible stuff. He really does separate himself a bit from other catchers. But like his brother, he sprays the ball around and he hits the ball into the ground like way too much. And what I found interesting with Wilson is that over the past 3 years, he's hit 21, 22, and 20 home runs. And he's scored 61, 65, and 55 runs. And he's driven in 61, 55, and 67 runs. So it's a very steady, very predictable profile. And so now it's a matter of where do you rank that amongst catchers, right? Because I think you could pretty much predict the same thing. He's also slated to hit fifth in the Cardinals order, and which I think is a good thing because the Cardinals have a decent offense. But I think he moves down as Jordan Walker gets better. I think if Jordan Walker comes out and plays and hits as well as we think he can, Contreras is definitely moving to 6 and potentially lower than that. Um, is it that you think that the other catchers below him just aren't going to hit those stats that he's hit the last 3 years, or is it that you think there's more in Wilson Contreras' bat?
I think the track record you spoke to really speaks to it. Just to give my next tier after this tier is called I have questions.
Yeah. Okay. That works.
So this kind of makes sense as to why tier three for me um, is kind of has Wilson and Realmuto, and then Moreno, who's the guy I'm really high on for the year. Because yeah, I mean, after everything he went through last year, going to the Cardinals, the whole debacle and the PR, he still went 264, 358, 467, and posted 826 OPS.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw, outside, his quality of contact was the best at the position. Like Murphy is right there, you
Sure.
know, Wilson Contreras, his brother is right there. So he's still hitting the crap out of the ball.
Yep.
So yeah, I see the lineup spot. I see the stability at the track record. Don't see any signs of change at the plate. Yes, the ground ball rate is less than we would, but like to put in pen or what we'd hope for if we're making up our perfect player. But he's been, as you outlined his stats, he's been really productive despite that. So
Mm-hmm.
um, it was a struggle to me to put him or Realmuto, um, ahead of each other because Realmuto is going to steal more. I
Mm-hmm.
have him. Steamer has them both for 492 plate appearances, so they're both sub 500. But I think before I get to the I have questions tier, these two I would take just ahead for at least one more year
Yeah.
until I see some signs that their skills are declining. But I definitely get it's not exciting. It's more as like say it's an oatmeal type pick.
Right. What I wrote the last two sentences in my write up for Contreras say, and yet he's become the Honda Accord of the catcher position. He's reliable, smart, and uncool. And that's kind of how I see it, right? It is boring at this point, and there's no real upside to speak of, but he's not going to hurt you. He's not going to sink you at catcher. And that is the risk you run, you know, like I don't think it's going to happen with Moreno, but if Moreno say he tanks, right, and he hits 240 with 7 home runs, like that tanks your season in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
Whereas someone like
yeah,
Contreras is going to keep you locked in, but not going to give you the upside that Moreno potentially can. So Real Muto you have at what is that, 7?
Uh, s- yes, yes,
Okay.
correct.
I have him at 9. Let's
Okay, getting a little closer.
yeah, let's dig in with him. I don't, for whatever reason, he's never been my cup of tea. And I know how good some of the big seasons he's put up. I think people get caught up in getting the steals at catcher.
Hmm.
And while I think, especially with Roto, that can be pretty big. Um, we debated on the roundtable about, what does steals actually mean these days? And are
Yeah.
they as important as they once were? And for
Hmm.
me, because I think they're more prevalent, Real Muto's steals are not as important as they once were. I also will say that he's 32. And so what, are those steals going to continue? He's just not a clear-cut top catcher for me anymore. I think he's a bit on the decline. He's
Yeah,
caught a lot of
his
games.
his hit rates and his contact rates started to show a little bit of sign of potential,
Mm-hmm.
first signs of age, right? It's one of the first things to go.
Yep. And he's got, you're talking about a 6.5% walk rate and a 25.6% K rate, coupled with the
Hmm.
12.2% swinging strike rate. If those numbers crater any more than that, if you're looking at a 5% walk rate and a 28% K rate, you have a catcher who's not, who I won't say not viable, but less viable. His walk rate was
Yeah.
the lowest that it's been since 2017. His K rate is the highest it's been since his rookie year in 14. So I think there are some signs of decline, right? Now,
Yes.
that said, he's probably a guarantee for 18 home runs and 10 steals and probably 60 to 70 homers and RBIs. And I think that's like he instead of putting him in that top 3, now I think you have to slot him as we did with Contreras, as I know what I'm getting from him. He's not going to sink me as long as he's healthy. That's great. Let's move on. What else do you have to add with Real Muto, if anything?
He's projected to have the 20th best OPS this year, and Wilson was projected to be fifth. And I think that's where I landed between of like Miyamoto is showing some signs of being 32. Wilson
Mm-hmm.
is not. And
Right.
like ultimately, yeah, the steals are nice, and he still might be kind of a unicorn at the position for maybe 1 or 2 more years.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the only guy who can steal you 12 bases. But I want the guy who still can swing it and is showing signs that, his ability to impact the ball is have not deteriorating at all.
Right. Well, and he's hitting 7th in that lineup, right? And with no real path to hitting higher. And while that Phillies lineup is really good, I also think they value Real Muto's defense and leadership, which is going to keep him on the field defensively, which takes away from the high end potential with his at bats. And so I don't know. He's a sell for me. I think I have him at 9. I'm very comfortable with that ranking. He's just not the guy who he once was, and that's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with that. He's just not a top catcher as we once saw him. He also DH'd a grand total of 0 games in
I
2000.
was just looking at that. I was gonna say I was just pulling it up. Is
Yeah.
he gonna get a chance to DH at all? And he's not.
Well,
So
look at the other guys on the team, like
right,
Schwarber,
Schwarber.
Bohm,
Yep.
Castellanos, Bryce Harper's older and playing first base. Like those are the guys taking the DH at bats, not Real Muto. So, all right. So you have Real Muto, you have Moreno, Wilson, Real Muto as your, what was that, 5,
Tier
6,
three.
7?
Yep. 5, 6, 7. Tier three. Yep.
So to review, I've got Adley, William Contreras, Mitch Garver, Cal Raleigh at 4. 5 for me is Sean Murphy. I didn't love putting him here, but between his quality of contact and that offense, I think it's really hard to push him down too far. He's not my favorite. He's not my cup of tea. Just from I don't enjoy him as a player. Maybe it's because he was on the A's and I'm a Mariners fan, but there's a lot to like, right? 91.5 average exit velocity, 115 max EV, almost a 16% barrel rate. That was one of those. I kind of did a double take. I didn't expect it to be that high. Pulls the ball over 50% of the time. Lower average hitter, right? 251 last season, but he posted an 844 OPS and hit 21 home runs in 438 plate appearances. I don't love that Travis d'Arnaud is the backup catcher because you're talking about an offensive catcher hitting from the same side, and his presence on the team. And I think that keeps Murphy from being in the Adley, Wilson Contreras, right, 600 plate appearance range. But I do think you're going to get 20 home runs from him. And I do think he's playing in an offense that's good enough to keep his runs and RBIs together as like a 130, 140 sort of place, which is very, very good. I have him fifth because I think there are numbers in his profile that say that there's more upside potentially. That's the differentiator for me between he and some of the other guys. Where do you have Murphy?
I have 12. I have nothing to dissent against the skills that you outlined. I just don't see him getting an opportunity to play as much as the guys I have ahead of him. I like his skills better.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of a modern baseball, machine in terms of what we value, the ability to pull the ball, hit the ball in the air,
Right.
barrel the ball, all those kinds of things. I just don't. Travis d'Arnaud, like you said, is still on the roster. Last year, he appeared 108 games, 438 plate appearances, and had no injuries.
Right.
And I just don't know how. I just don't see him getting any higher than that. I mean, look, they won like what 104 games, broke all kinds of offensive records. Why are they going to do anything different with him?
Right.
His last 3 years is 119 games, 148, 612 appearances, and 22 with the A's. And then they sold high, and then last year he was back to 108 and 438.
Right.
Oh,
The one
I think
caveat is
the positive for you is for your side is he's shown he can do it, right? In
right.
22, 612 plate appearances, so that his body can hold up. He is 29 years old, so he can. I just question I don't see any signs that the Braves that are going to.
Right. For me too, this is a slight hedge that d'Arnaud gets hurt because he's been injury prone in his career, and I do think that Murphy d'Arnaud gets hurt, Murphy gets to 500 plate appearances or 525 or something like that. You could be talking about 20.
That changes the calculus.
Right. He becomes
absolutely
Cal Raleigh essentially. Right.
Oh yeah.
Again, I don't love him. He's a player that I probably would take at least three of the guys below him on my list before Murphy. Not because I think statistically it would be the right decision to make, but just because I don't really like Sean Murphy very much. But I still had to rank him.
Yeah. Another guy too. We just talked about JT. You guys projected to hit seventh because of the depth of the lineup that he's in.
Totally.
So yes, good team. Do you want a guy that's on a poor team that hits third or second, or do you want a guy that's on a really good team that hits seventh? You can have that debate all day long.
Right. So at 6, I have Yainer Diaz, the catcher for the Astros. I have to admit, so I have him above Will Smith. I have him above Real Muto. I have him above Wilson Contreras. I knew he was good. I had him early on in the season. I ended up cutting him last season in our home league before he kind of blew up. He's one of those, you look at his stat line, I was stunned. I had no clue he hit 23 homers in 377 plate appearances. So 282, 308, 538 slug, 846 OPS, 377 plate appearances, 23 homers, 60 RBIs. The one concern is the 2.9% walk rate. So the question I would ask with the player with the walk rate like that is, what gives a pitcher what incentive is there for a pitcher to throw a strike, right? And I think players that are outliers like Diaz get figured out in the offseason. So a good front office is going to stare at these numbers and say, Mariners front office, they're going to say to their pitchers, do not throw this guy a strike, right? Do not throw this guy a strike. There's no real reason. 46.4% chase rate, right? 46.4%, but at 86.8% zone contact rate, meaning he swings at everything and he hits everything. So I rank him here because I can't ignore the 23 homers and 377 plate appearances. And it wasn't like he was going to have a lot fewer home runs in other parks. These were legitimate home runs. But I do think there's going to be some adjustment to his profile by pitchers coming into the season. But if you have a catcher, he's 24 years old, right? So if you have a catcher at 24 that hits for that much power, for an organization that unfortunately I trust them in terms of their ability to develop offensive players, I'm not as enthusiastic about him as you are about Moreno, but this is my pushing the chips to the middle of the table and saying this dude could actually be really, really, really good. He also caught 60 of the 104 games that he played in, meaning they see his bat as the value, not necessarily his ability to catch. And they brought in Victor Caratini to play, but Caratini's not going to take at bats from Diaz if he's hitting. So I don't know. This is my gamble. This is my roll of the dice. I don't know if I had the stones to take him over a Will Smith or a Real Muto or a Contreras in a redraft, but I would think about it. And I'd be upset if he did come out and hit 30 home runs because I think he has that potential. Do you have Diaz on your list? And if you do, where is he?
I do. I have him at 10. He's in my fourth tier, that I have questions tier.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I think I have to start with playing time. It's the theme, right? And so he had 53 games at catcher last year, 60 games at DH. And Yordan Alvarez had 53 games on the IL with the abdominal side issue.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of his avenue to get on the team. And then once he got on the team and started to hit, they found the role for him. So I question whether or not, obviously he's going to be their primary catcher. So can he do that and maintain those contact and quality of contact rates? That's a question for me.
Mm-hmm.
I question whether he can be a full-time defensive catcher.
Mm-hmm.
I don't question the ability to impact the ball. However, he was really, really fortunate on his home runs. His home run to fly ball rate was 31%, which was 10%, 10% more
That's
than
Crawford boxes, bro.
Yeah, so he was a little fortunate. So if he regresses back a little bit there, he doesn't have the plate skills of the walk rate to stabilize it, with that. So yeah, those are my questions. I see the skills. I kind of throw my hands up because I'm like, is he going to catch enough? Are they going to let him? What's he going to do if he's under 100 WRC plus? Are they going to keep giving him a chance to hit out of it? What if his BABIP normalizes?
Right.
Because his track record in the minors, he never hit that many home runs. So, but to your point, Houston is a favorable park for right-handed power. So, really skilled player. I think exciting at 25 years old. I just have a lot of questions, and that's why he's in tier 4 for me.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, it's scary, right? I think the amount of chase is nuts, and I'm not a low walk rate guy. I'm on record saying that kind of profile scares me. They don't have a lot in the minors either, though. They don't have a lot behind him, right? And I think that what he did last season, and there is some pedigree, right? He was a decent prospect, and so I think they would give him time to shake out of it to answer that question. Expected home runs by park on Savant, the lowest number for him last season was 18 in San Francisco. The highest number, I believe, was 29, which is pretty crazy, right? So
Yeah.
I guess the point in bringing that up for me, you're right, that there was some surprise or there was some luck involved, certainly. But I guess I bring that up just because, say it's 18 home runs in 376 plate appearances. That's still a very good rate at catcher. I'm fascinated to see what happens with him. I think they are going to go into this season truly trusting him. I would think that they would go outside of the organization potentially if he didn't perform over the course of, say, 250 at bats. I'm just looking real quickly at.
Yeah, and I pointed out like the rate stat on the fly ball rate in terms of a rate stat because his his fly ball rate was only 36%. So
Right.
that's what I'm saying. When he did put the ball in the air, so you're betting on, yes, okay, even if you buy into his ability when he does put it in the air to hit it, for power,
Hmm.
you're counting on him to put it more in the air more to continue at that level because
Right.
36% is not an elevated fly ball rate, which
Right.
obviously he needs to elevate for power.
Yeah, I think from a rate standpoint, regression is pretty clearly going to happen in 24 for him. Um, but I also think he's a quality hitter, right? And that's the other part
Yeah.
of his profile that I really like. It's not just the power, it's the 282 average. Um,
Hmm.
without
Yeah, that's
without an elevated BABIP, right? 292 BABIP, 282
292 BABIP.
average.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I
Yeah,
think
so he
there's
can post a Moreno like batting average to your
right,
point
right,
with more power.
right. In what is typically a very good offense. Um, he'll be interesting. Like I said, I have him at 6. I have Will Smith at 7. I have Real Muto and Contreras 9 and 10. My number 8 is Francisco Alvarez. Where do you have Alvarez? I'm very interested in this.
I have him at, sorry, my dock is getting in the way to my sheet, trying to select the row so I can follow it across. I have him at 11.
All right. Um, I wanted to push him higher. And I think if Alvarez, I wanted to push him as high as 5. Um, I think he's a hell of a bat. At 20, going into his age 22 season, I didn't quite feel comfortable. And I've said this, I think mostly on the Monos pod, but if you watch him run, he looks like he needs to be flipping pizzas instead of playing catcher because he does not look athletic one bit when he runs. Makes me a little bit nervous about him overall. But you look at his numbers, you look at the pedigree, obviously, and you look at the fact that he's going to probably get 5. I think you'll see him from a plate appearance standpoint get close to Adley and Contreras this season. Um, why do you have him at 11? Let's see if we're in agreement in terms of his skill, and why do you have him at 11 instead of higher?
You had him at 9, so we're not that
8.
far apart, right?
At 8.
8. Okay, so 3 apart. Okay. And just to make sure, we have not gotten a Sal Perez on your list, right?
Not yet.
Okay, cool. Just to make sure, I just to make sure we didn't miss a debate there. It doesn't sound like we're gonna have one.
Right.
Um, so for me, yeah, like Alvarez is not the kind of like I'm already reticent on prospects. That's my track record.
Sure.
But yeah, to your point, when I saw him in the Futures game, when I saw him make his debut, his athleticism or his stiffness at the plate, I think we had a podcast, we talked about that. And it was one of the things that I mentioned. He just like, man, this guy doesn't look like he has a lot of, wrist movement or, there's just kind of like a groove swing, kind of one path.
Right.
Wasn't impressed. However, when I looked at what he did last year, he swung less. His plate skills really improved.
Mm-hmm.
He had a sub league average reach rate, but he still was fairly aggressive in the zone at 69%. So chasing 29, swung less in the zone at 69. So that to me, he was getting more selective at 22 is a really positive sign.
Mm-hmm.
I like that he's not reaching. His contact rate improved. His fly ball rate improved. His chase rate improved. His BABIPs, starting with the nits, his BABIPs those first 2 years are 143 and 222.
Right.
His fly ball rate is 43%. We already mentioned the limited athleticism. Is this kind of guy that is going to run low 220, 230 batting averages because his BABIP, right? I don't think it's enough of a sample to say this is his BABIP. This is what you can expect for him.
Right.
But those numbers do concern me. Um, sub 300 OBP is concerning to me. But again, those are nits. The positives I see are the raw power. Fangraphs has him as 70 for
Mm-hmm.
raw as a prospect. Like you, I think his playing time is going to increase. He only got 6 games at DH. I kind of question that, given looking at that depth chart. I don't know why he can't get more than that.
Because the Mets,
I don't
man.
think. Yeah, well, there you go. Matt gonna Met, right?
Right.
So I asked about Sal. So I have him above Sal because I see him, if you want power at catcher, I'd go with Alvarez. I think to me he's on the ascent,
Mm-hmm.
whereas Sal has a track record of power and is on the descent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the low batting average, and it does concern me. But I saw enough improvement with the pedigree, with improved playing time, that's why he came in at 11 for me in tier 5.
Mhm. It's a bit of, so 21 years old, over 90% or over a 90-mile-an-hour average exit, 114 max, 12.5-degree launch angle, 12.5% barrel, almost a 45% hard hit rate. Those are big time, right? At 21. The BABIP, I agree. I think it probably normalizes to 260 or so, something like that, instead of 300 for him. He's going to have to hit a ground ball at 100 miles an hour, 110 miles an hour to get a base hit, pretty much. But that's no different than, like, say, Cal Raleigh isn't as slow as Alvarez, but similar, right? In that I think that's something that you come to expect at catcher. I also think that the Mets are priming him to be a star. And so he's going to start to see at bats in the middle of that order pretty quickly. I think he ends up, honestly, I think he ends up next season close to William Contreras. I think he's going to be very, very, very good. I'm a little low with his rank compared to what I think he's actually going to do. I just think the talent in his bat is very real. He already has a 25 home run season in his portfolio, and he's going into his age 22 season. And he also, whether you pay attention to prospect lists or not, he's a former number 1 prospect essentially, and a consensus top 10. And so that all means something to me. It is hard to trust a 22-year-old to be a top 5 player at a position, unless your name is Julio or Ronald, or Juan. But I'm excited to see what Alvarez does. He's the end of my tier, of this tier. My next tier, to get to your point, is I called the geriatrics ward. I had Real Muto at 9, Wilson Contreras at 10. We've covered them already. And then the aforementioned Salvador Perez at 11. We've gotten to what number with you?
We just talked about 11 for me, which was Alvarez, and I have Perez at 12. So
Sweet.
Kind of syncing up.
Why don't you go ahead and take Salvi?
Yeah, so I mean, I was the guy that was beating the drum when he was the number 1 catcher that he shouldn't be there and that he was overrated.
Right.
He just has leaned into it. Last year had an 86 WRC plus, with a 49.5% chase rate, but still found a way to mash 23 home runs with a 292 on base. So it's 33 going in 34. I think if you want home runs and RBIs and you can stomach the plate approach, I think he has a place in a starting lineup in a 16-team league. Hope it's not my team. It's not the look that I want. Yeah, he does what he does, right? I didn't see anything that was markedly different. I think you could continue to see the decline in contact rate and increase in swinging strike as he ages. His swinging strike last year was 17%.
Right.
But the man loves to swing. He swung in the zone almost 78% of the time. So that's why I have him at 12. I think it's the age curve. It's the 2 category production, which doesn't really drive a high rating for me on my list.
I agree with all that. I think he does have a bit more RBI potential than some of the others. He drove in 80 last season. I think it's probably something similar to how we talked about Wilson Contreras. I think low to mid 20s homers, a decent RBI total at catcher, and he's going to sink you virtually everywhere else, right? If you're in an OBP league, he stinks. If you're in an OPS league, he probably stinks, right? He's not going to score a ton of runs, mostly because of his inability to run, but also because that Kansas City offense isn't very good. So he's more like, I called Contreras the Accord. I think Perez is more like an old minivan, right? Where he's just he's going to get you from point A to point B. He's not going to completely tank your team at catcher, but there are going to be some flat tires along the way. But that said, I know it was a rabbit ball year, but he had 48 home runs 3 years ago. And I think that there is talent in that bat, right? We all know that. He's just, I don't know. I will not have any shares of Salvador Perez this season. I promise you that. Uh, Next up at 12. So he was your 12, right?
He was my 12, and then my last player in his tier was Sean Murphy, who we already covered, who I think has much better demonstrated skills, and we covered him pretty comprehensively. I just question if he's going to push up on the playing time.
Got it. Your 14, 15, and 16.
This tier have 4 players. I call this tier they have jobs. Have Heim, Ruiz, and then a 2A tie between Ohapi and Naylor.
Mm-hmm. Nice. We have the same players basically. So I have, again, I said Perez was 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 is Ruiz, Heim, Bo Naylor, Logan Ohapi at 15, and Moreno at 16. So basically same players. Interesting, neither of us had Elias Diaz, Alejandro Kirk, Danny Jansen, or MJ Melendez in our lists. If we have time, we can cover why. So Ruiz at 12 for me. I think, we've had debates about Ruiz in the past. I think for me, there are some very redeemable skills in his profile. He did have 18 home runs last season. He did drive in 67 runs, but the 16th percentile average EV, 87.4 miles an hour, low barrel rate, low hard hit rate, chases a ton, doesn't walk a lot. He's a free swinger who makes a lot of contact. And while I think he's young enough at 25 to shift that a bit, even if he does become a better hitter, he plays for the Nationals, right? So how many runs and RBIs is he truly going to accumulate playing for an offense that's that bad? I do like the fact that he hits third. I do like the fact that, there is a lot of pedigree with him. But he's another one. He's younger, but he's another one like Real Muto, like Wilson Contreras, like Salvi, that I think is pretty predictable. And he's not going to completely tank you, but he's not my cup of tea. You have anything to add with Ruiz?
Yeah, he was sub 100 OPS, so sub league average from both sides of the plate.
Mm-hmm.
He is a switch hitter. His expected home run to fly ball rate was 4%.
Yeah.
I mean, and then his BABIP in the first half when he stung was 220.
Right.
And then in the second half it was 310 and he was better.
Right.
So, and then despite the fact he's 25, he's actually one of the more slower players at the position.
Right.
His speed rating on Fangraph is 1.6, and so yes, he puts the ball in play, but is he even athletic enough to even beat out some of those hits? So to me, he looks like a BABIP dependent player. Like when his BABIP's going well, he may be productive, but he doesn't do enough in terms of quality of contact to really impact anywhere else.
Right.
So, but
And you think about
I have job steer.
right.
He has the job. He's going to play. He's going to post. Right. They don't really have anyone else.
When you traded Trey Turner and Max Scherzer for him, they're going to play him for sure, right? I also think at this point, I think about like, okay, what if this player reaches like their 95th percentile outcome from a talent standpoint? What does that mean for Ruiz? It's probably 22, 23 homers, right? Somewhere in there, probably a 280 average, which is nice, but you're still going to be at 70 runs and 70 RBIs because of the team that he plays on, which places him with Will Smith, Yainer Diaz types of dudes. So the upside isn't there either. Yeah, it's again not going to sink you. I think the cool thing is now that this position is deep enough that you don't have to worry about, unless someone hogs catchers, you don't really have to worry about getting sunk at catcher anymore the way you used to, right? It doesn't fall off in the same way that it did. You had Ruiz at what number?
14. So we skipped over. We skipped over Heim.
Okay, let's do Heim.
I had Heim one. To me, he's just like he's a solid defensive catcher, good team context, just kind of a league average player. He walks at 8% time. That's about league average. It's 289 BABIP, about league average.
Right.
34% chase rate, just to take over league average. He doesn't strike out too much, puts enough balls in play. His barrel rate was 8%, league average.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, he just posts, he plays. Last year he played hurt in the second half. I
Mm-hmm.
know he was on fire in the first half, but to me, that was just, I didn't see anything skills wise that led to that. I didn't see a change. He was just getting fortunate. And, I think he's a good example of what can go right, right? You get a good guy who posts, who doesn't have any major flaws in a good team context. He had a really productive year, but I don't see anything skills wise that elevates him into anything special.
Right. And he's going to hit seventh this season with Evan Carter kind of hitting above him, taking his place because he had 363 plate appearances, hitting sixth. And I think he'll drop a little bit in that lineup. The other thing with him is, that Texas lineup was amazing, amazing. And you had a lot of players that had career type years. And to me, if you have players that had career years, it's you can't necessarily count on it. And his 95 RBIs is what I think people gravitate to. That's not something that he's necessarily, you can't predict that he's going to repeat it, right? Especially if they
Correct.
go in the
Yeah.
order, especially if there's some regression in that offense, right? A player like Josh Young, I don't believe in his talent. I don't think he's going to be as good as he was last season. Evan Carter is a 22-year-old, rookie that's counted on to play, to have 500 plate appearances and be good. Corey Seager, as we'll talk about, in a couple of weeks here, I'm sure you're excited to talk about, had over 1,000 OPS. I think Seager's phenomenal. Is he going to have a 1,000 OPS again? Marcus Semien is on the backside of his career. So I don't see the 95 RBIs. I just don't. But, 18 home runs, he's going to get the plate appearances. Mitch Garver isn't, the specter of Mitch Garver isn't there to take away plate appearances anymore. Again, he's pretty vanilla, and I think he belongs exactly where we put him. Who's your next guy?
Yeah, so we're down. I had a two-way tie. I copped out for tie for 16th between Ohapi and Naylor.
Mm-hmm.
I think I wanted to talk about both, and I really just couldn't make up my mind who deserved to be in and out. So I just again copped out and just split it.
Right
Split
on.
vote.
So let's have these two be our final players that we cover today, and then we'll leave the random question for next week as well.
Okay.
So Bo Naylor is your player. You roster him in our league. I assume you're going to keep him in our league. I am on record saying he's my favorite catcher. Why don't you talk about Bo Naylor, and I'll take Ohapi.
Yeah, so I think Bo Naylor, from a fantasy perspective, right, to be excited about. The power that he showed in the minors, and then as well, he came up last year, league average barrel rate, but he walked 13% of the time, put the ball in the air half the time, pulled it 40% of the time, and he had some steals to go along. He had 5 steals, 11 home runs and 5 steals in 367 plate appearances. And again, like nothing that he did was outlier based on what he did in the minor leagues.
Mm-hmm.
His ISO was 232. I think there's a nit to pick with his quality of contact. However, it was his first major blush of playing time, in the majors. So there may be some adjustments, that he can get better. But, his last line was 237, 339, 470 as a rookie with 809 OPS.
Mm-hmm.
My concern with Naylor is his playing time. They brought in, I want to say Heineman, that's not the right word. They brought in a pedestrian defensive catcher, and I don't trust them to play him full time. I also worried about DH because they did a Rule 5 draft of De Los Santos, who's a first base DH only.
Mm-hmm.
And then they traded Savali for Manzardo, who's first base DH only.
Mm-hmm.
And then his brother is first base DH only. So Austin Hedges is the catcher I couldn't think of.
Yeah.
So they signed him. Austin Hedges is a premium defensive catcher, offers nothing with the bat. But I don't trust Cleveland to not try to suppress his arbitration value and suppress his playing time. I don't trust them to not prefer the defensive catcher. I don't trust them to find him at bats at DH because they just clogged the DH spot. They have three guys who now have to play at DH, and that's before Bo.
Right.
So as much as I love him and I think he could be like that, I can dream on the fact that he can be JTR in 3 years, the guy who gives you, 22-15
Mhm.
in fantasy. Like I don't know. I think it's going to be a bumpy road to get there.
Mhm.
Um, so
It's
that's my take on Bo.
so the skills are there. You outlined the skills completely. I do worry a little bit about a platoon risk with him. I know he struggles at times with lefties a little bit, but he's so good against righties. So here's the positive, right? He's so good against righties. He elevates, he doesn't pull the ball a ton, but he elevates and he hits it with so much power that I'm there with him. Like you get the steals from him, the walk rate's going to be higher. Uh I also think say Bo Naylor settles in as the strong side platoon catcher that gets some at bats against lefties, you're looking at maybe 400 to 450 plate appearances per year, right? He's going to hit 20 to 25 home runs in 450 plate appearances, I think. I also think he's going to add, 10, 15 steals, at which point his runs and RBIs may not be elite at catcher, but you're talking about pretty premium production from him. Um, I love him. I think that he and Harry Ford are really unique catchers in that they provide some speed. Harry Ford's the Mariners prospect that's coming up, and I think you see those two players in that top tier with Rutschman, Contreras, whoever the next Mitch Garver is, for years to come. I think Bo Naylor has star potential. I think he's the highest ceiling of any of the Naylor brothers. I love him. I think he's great. And even if he is for this season, next season, strong side platoon for the most part, I still think that he's the perfect, if you're willing to carry two catchers on your team, he is the perfect catcher to have. I really believe in his bat. The only reason why he's lower than all the other guys is the questions you have about playing time. That's the only reason. And that Cleveland has a history of playing defense only catchers, right? It was Zunino. Before Zunino, it was Roberto Perez. Yan Gomes was considered that before. Like they believe in having a defensive catcher, and if they continue with that philosophy, again, what do you do with Naylor? But I think his bat is too good to keep out of the lineup, in my opinion. I love him.
I agree with you. They Cleveland, I'm wearing a Cleveland hat, and that's for Bo because he is my favorite catcher right
Right,
now. And
right,
I follow Cleveland. I have a buddy who likes Cleveland. I got into Cleveland because I love Francona, who's now retired.
yeah,
They always have good pitchers. I'm a pitching guy.
yeah,
So I kind of get sucked in. Jose Ramirez is always a fun watch. But bottom line is Stephen Kwan. You go on, list goes on, right?
right,
They frustrate me. I don't know what they're doing.
right,
All the middle infielders in their system, they don't make any trades. Again, this whole De Los Santos pick with Manzardo, like I don't like what are you doing? I can't see the picture. I can't see the pieces of the what they're trying to do with their roster.
right,
And it frustrates me because they have players and I'm invested in fantasy and I think
right,
just are good players. And it's hard for me to understand like where the pieces fit.
right.
But
Well,
so yeah.
I think with De Los Santos, because he's a righty, I think he just ends up taking the at bats against left-handed pitching. So, guarding against Mazzardo or Josh Naylor, one of those two or both. I get it, and I don't think it impacts Bo Naylor. I think the impact with Bo Naylor is the philosophy of we want a defensive catcher first. I think that's what impacts him the most. So Ohapi, real quick, I have him at 15. I love him. Um, if Aaron Horn didn't roster him, I would be all over him, but he's asking too much as usual. There are some concerns in his profile. He does swing and miss a ton, 15.9% swinging strike rate, but 56.3% pull rate in 199 plate appearances last season with a 48.1% pull rate, fly ball rate. If those two things maintain with the power that he has and the ability, not great bat to ball, but it's not horrible. This dude could hit 30 home runs. And I don't think it would surprise anybody. Like he's got that kind of swing and profile. And I can't stand the team. It's not because I'm a Mariners fan. I don't like the way they run the team. I don't like any of the stories that have been coming out about how stars are treated versus others. That's not just Ohtani, it was Trout too. I couldn't, I don't know if I could bring myself to roster an Angels offensive player and root for him, but I do like a lot of what I see. I think there's a lot of swing and miss here. I think there's a lot of power here. I don't necessarily, his track record in the minors doesn't say low average player, but I think he's changed his swing profile a bit to try to hit for more power. So it might be a little depressed compared to what it was in the minors. He was traded from the Phillies to the Angels for Brandon Marsh in a challenge trade a year and a half ago. But I'm a fan of Ohapi. If I didn't roster Garver already in our home league, Ohapi would be a target for me. I do think there's a low floor for him. If he gets in a rut or he's, stops hitting sliders, that kind of thing, you could be looking at a 210, 220 sort of player with 18 home runs. But is there a 250 average with a, close to 850 OPS type of year in Ohapi? I think there is. I like him a lot.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what you said. The thing that gets me excited is he ran single digit swinging strike rates in the minors, and I see the same adjustments to hit for power in the 56% pull rate, 48% fly ball rate, right? So he is looking to pull the ball in the air, and he had a 16, almost 60% barrel rate, is 15.6. So those are the reasons to get excited. So you see a guy has a track record of swinging and missing less, who's undergoing a swing change. My nits to pick is that he had a labrum injury, and that scares the shit out of me.
Yep.
Because labrums are nothing to be messed with. But yeah, I mean, if he can transition or move back towards some of the swinging strike rates he had in the Myers with the power that he's demonstrated already as a young catcher in the Anaheim Stadium, which favors right-handed power quite a bit.
Right.
Yeah, I think he could be a really nice add down here.
There's potential there. So just to run real quickly, let's do our top. I don't know. Do your top five. I'll do my top five, and we'll get up out of here. Top five. You had Adley 1, Contreras 2, and then who were your 3, 4, 5?
Raleigh, Will, and Moreno.
Okay. And I had Rutschman, William, Garver, Raleigh, Murphy. This is interesting, though. I think, to wrap it up, this is we are most in agreement today, or more in agreement today than I can remember at a position.
We haven't talked forever.
Right.
Like, it's not like we've been like, who was your top 5?
That's true. It's super fun, man. I missed doing this. I'm really excited to ramp this up again and get through our positions. I missed it. This is good times, man. This is super good times.
Always good to talk to you,
So,
Tino. Thanks for reaching out, and first base here soon. I'm already hammering away on it.
A first base, hopefully at some point next weekend. I should have this up later on tonight.
All right. Good luck in your trade talks. I'll talk to you. Thank you,
brother. Good to see you.